Some time ago, when the world was experiencing peaceful days, it suddenly had to endure an unimaginable catastrophe. This event occurred when a so-called democracy bomb was dropped from above. No one knew whether it was released by an American, North Korean, or some clueless Russian. But the consequence was that the entire planet became covered by a terrifying layer of rust. Everywhere from cities to rural areas was corroded. All land, ponds, lakes, rivers, and even buildings were destroyed. Eventually, the world transformed into a barren, cold, desolate desert that was frightening. In this devastated landscape, a mysterious young man appeared. He was completely covered from head to toe, looking no different from a ghost emerging from a nightmare, and at this moment, he was stuck at a checkpoint. While waiting, the young man's eyes turned to a wanted poster on the bulletin board. Immediately, the fat manager of the area spoke up, saying that the person on the paper was a dangerous criminal, being hunted intensely because he was believed to cultivate mold. At that time, fungi were no longer considered normal food, but had become a symbol of toxicity. In the city, people still lived, traded, and worked daily, but the atmosphere was always tense because security forces appeared everywhere. They checked every alley, every stall. Anyone showing signs of trading or storing fungi was immediately arrested. To the guards, fungi were also considered like drugs. Anyone involved was treated as a criminal. In a brothel deep in the old quarter, where red lights flickered, a wealthy madam sat leaning back in her chair, continuously rambling about her painful and bitter life. The young girls sitting around her tried to pretend to listen, nodding occasionally, sometimes interjecting a few words to show empathy. But in reality, they were only thinking about trivial matters, gossiping about various random topics. In the same house, in a private room, a young couple was doing something that seemed quite shady. At a glance, people might misunderstand that they were engaged in some dark, inappropriate act. People inside suddenly cried out in fear, saying it was too big, while the young man gently comforted her that being big was effective. Surprisingly, it was you who had dark thoughts, as they weren't engaged in carnal activities but were injecting and dispensing medicine to treat illness. The young man's name was Milo, a passionate young doctor trusted by the people. He was trying his best to help the suffering people cure the rust disease that was consuming their bodies bit by bit. Without his own clinic, Milo was kindly lent a corner in the brothel by the good-hearted prostitutes to serve as a temporary medical facility. One day, while Milo was treating two poor father and son, the brothel madam sitting nearby told him about the rumor that those who protected fungi were actually the culprits. They had secretly spread rust, causing the world to become as desolate as it was now. After completing his work, Milo was offered a free night of passion with some of the prostitutes by the madam. The girls giggled upon hearing this, showing excitement. If it were someone else, they certainly would. But Milo just smiled, politely declining. He said he was indeed handsome, but not so easy. The comment made everyone burst into laughter, making them appreciate him even more. On his way home, Milo stopped by a familiar bakery to buy some food. At the same time, he secretly bought some fungi from the shop owner. The owner handed over the goods while anxiously instructing him to be careful, not to be discovered by the guards, otherwise the whole town would be in chaos. Only Milo was a doctor. The people here couldn't do without him. The owner refused to accept payment, as Milo had previously treated his daughter for free. But Milo, being an upright person, still insisted on leaving the money, considering it a fair exchange, and then left. Upon returning home, Milo gave the bread to his older sister. She was once a guard, but had now contracted the rust disease, forcing her to quit her job. The siblings' livelihood mainly depended on Milo. Just after eating, Milo was already diligently formulating, as he had been sponsored a sophisticated, modern formulation machine by the committee. His sister worriedly reminded her brother to be very cautious with Kurikawa, the committee chairman of the district. He was a treacherous person who never gave anything to anyone for free. Getting too involved with him would not end well. But Milo just smiled, saying he wasn't afraid. He had only one goal: to formulate a cure for the rust disease to save the town. Meanwhile, at the checkpoint office, the fat man continued to brag about the mysterious wanted criminal. He boasted that the man had such extraordinary abilities that all the corpses behind him were brought back by him. The masked person accompanying him showed curiosity, pressing questions about the strange items nearby. The fat man explained that they were all just corpses. Suddenly, the TV in the room broadcasted breaking news. Outside the city, giant mushrooms had unexpectedly sprouted, growing as tall as towers, causing Milo's sister to become restless. Milo asked his sister's permission to go out. Before leaving, she reminded him to be especially vigilant. Milo went to the bakery to get more fungi as planned, but was unexpectedly robbed by a kid who thought it was food. He immediately chased after, rushing into a small alley. To his surprise, he was ambushed by the boy. Seeing Milo's delicate face, the boy thought he was a girl and stopped his attack. But surprisingly, Milo growled, asserting that he was a proper man. Nevertheless, Milo didn't blame him but instead treated the wound on the boy's eye, then promised to treat him to a hearty meal next time. Right after the boy left, Kurokawa, the district committee chairman, suddenly appeared. He again used his persuasive tone, tempting Milo to follow him to the big city to treat patients under better conditions. Milo still firmly refused, as he had many patients in his hometown. Kurokawa wouldn't give up. He tried to step closer, making Milo worry about exposing the bag of fungi in his hand. Just at the tense moment, a giant mushroom suddenly sprouted right in the middle. Kurokawa was distracted and turned back toward the checkpoint. At the checkpoint office, the masked man accompanying the fat officer declared that those corpses were of monks. He carried the responsibility of bringing them back to their families. The guards temporarily believed his words, not checking further. But they still questioned the bow he carried, as bows were prohibited weapons in the city. At this moment, the monk revealed his true appearance, his fiery red hair standing out. And with an arrow, he caused fungi to grow fiercely, destroying everything around. While fleeing from the guards, he accidentally encountered Milo. Meanwhile, at home, Milo's sister had put on her guard uniform, determined to go out to protect the city. When Milo just ran back, trying to stop her, he was knocked unconscious by her for talking too much. By the time he woke up, she had already left. Milo had no choice but to focus on his laboratory, formulating medicine from the newly acquired fungi. While working, Milo suddenly heard a noise behind him. When he turned around, a scared young man standing there, along with a severely injured old man. This person introduced himself as Bisco, the man being hunted by the entire world. Because of suspicion, the guard had asked the person in front of him to prove he was a monk by reciting a passage from the scripture. A seemingly simple request, but one that actually put him in a difficult position, because in that moment he couldn't think of any words to respond with. The silence enveloping them made the situation more tense. He knew that if he revealed any flaw, there would be no way back. In an instant, he chose to act. He shot a powerful arrow that destroyed the doorway, wood fragments exploding, dust billowing, and immediately after that the large cloth concealing the secret was pulled down, revealing Bisco's grandfather along with a giant crab. Everyone who witnessed it was astonished. The two had no choice but to immediately run away, as the sound of footsteps and gunfire echoed from afar. The hippopotamus guard team, carrying huge machine guns, was in hot pursuit. It's embedded in the ground, creating deep holes, smoke and dust completely covering the pathway. Bisco quickly jumped on the crab's back, his hands tightly gripping the bow, continuously shooting sharp arrows to deal with each hippopotamus approaching, his accuracy and speed preventing the guards from getting close. At the same time, his grandfather was not idle, but used special fungi with jumping abilities to propel both of them straight up and over the city wall. The unexpected jump creating chaos throughout the town, leaving the guards unable to react in time. After landing inside, Bisco gave Milo exactly the kind of fungi needed for him to prepare medicine to treat his grandfather's wounds. By now, the old man was severely wounded, blood soaking his clothes, his breath weakening. Milo, with his keen sense of smell like a hunting dog, could tell from the scent of blood that the old man's wounds were extremely serious and couldn't be sustained with simple oral medication. Milo urgently begged to perform surgery immediately, as time for the old man. Bisco, with a troubled heart, finally nodded in agreement. He gave Milo exactly 10 minutes to prepare the medicine before proceeding with the surgery. His heart was full of doubts, but in this situation, there was no other choice. However, the chaos didn't stop there. Just as they began working, the chairman's men discovered their hiding place, firing a warning shot that brought the room to extreme tension. Bisco quickly grabbed Milo as a hostage, but they laughed mockingly, casually declaring they didn't care, and then still fired without hesitation, determined to eliminate the entire group. Bisco had no other choice. He shot several powerful arrows to stop the enemy's advance, while patiently waiting for the rabbit-headed minions to come closer. As soon as they entered the fray, he quickly seized the opportunity, preparing to take both Milo and his grandfather away. Milo's clinic was now overrun with fungi and completely destroyed, looking like a deformed forest. Although Milo regretted it, he had no choice. If they didn't sacrifice this, their group would be in danger. At this critical moment, Milo's sister arrived driving a vehicle, crashing straight into the area where the guard team was blocking. Because she was a high-ranking commander, the guard soldiers immediately obeyed her orders. The situation was reported in detail. That afternoon, Bisco and his grandfather were about to be cornered. They had to use the special jumping fungi to fly over the city wall once more. A risky decision, but the only escape route. However, just as they were about to leave, a giant hippopotamus suddenly charged at them, opening its jaws wide as if wanting to skinship with Bisco with a deadly bite. Surprisingly, everyone was amazed to see Bisco single-handedly lift the entire hippopotamus and throw it far away. Elsewhere, Kirikawa stood waiting, beside him a pink-haired girl. She apologized to him for the oversight that allowed Bisco to escape, but he seemed hardly concerned. With a cold face, he immediately ordered his subordinates to continue implementing the plan, as his main preventing Bisco from directly encountering the main guard force, avoiding chaos beyond control. A few hours earlier, Bisco and his grandfather had fortunately crossed the city wall, finding a corner to rest. Bisco's grandfather was now suffering from the vicious rust disease. He knew well that he didn't have much time left. He tried to instruct Bisco to continue striving, even though he wouldn't be by his side in the future. In his eyes, Bisco was the healthiest person, the only hope. He had mastered all the skills that his grandfather had taught him, except for the ability to prepare medicine. Bisco refused to listen, shaking his head, absolutely rejecting the idea that his grandfather considered his own life so lightly. They had gone through so many hardships, had destroyed dozens of checkpoints just to find the rare rust-eating fungi with the hope of creating a cure for his grandfather. So he swore he wouldn't let his grandfather die, despite all dangers. Bisco moved closer to where the crab was resting, when suddenly a rocket came flying through the as lightning. He immediately drew his bow and shot an arrow. The rocket exploded in mid-air, fragments scattering, surprising the girl controlling the snail aircraft in the sky. Sensing something dangerous approaching, Bisco's grandfather hurriedly told him to hide under the crab to avoid the poison that the snail was about to spray. Bisco tried to shoot back. Suddenly, an electronic eel came out of nowhere, biting straight into his leg. At that moment, the aircraft above fired a volley of bullets. His grandfather didn't hesitate, rushing out to shield his grandson. He trembled from being shot, blood soaking his clothes. Bisco was stunned. Bisco tightened his grip on the bow, channeling all his strength to shoot a fatal arrow, causing the aircraft to explode and crash to the ground. Without delay, he immediately rode the crab straight into town to find a doctor, desperation spurring his steps forward without stopping. When the two managed to hide in the underground sewer, Milo was surprised by the vitality of Bisco's grandfather, taking not falling, as if his toughness had become legendary. Bisco urgently asked Milo if he could treat his grandfather. Milo confidently affirmed that he could. Bisco decided to go outside and cause a distraction to buy time for Milo's treatment, but Milo firmly insisted on treating Bisco's wounds first before letting him go out to fight. Bisco handed his grandfather over to Milo and then rushed outside. Elsewhere, Milo's sister received information that the direction she was heading was actually a trap set up by Kirikawa's people, and the correct direction should be westward. A guard advised her to stay calm before hearing more, as they had just discovered a giant mushroom growing right in Milo's clinic, completely destroying the place. Milo's sister was very angry but still had to give directives to her subordinates, then decided to head straight west alone. As for Bisco, he had cleaned out all of Kirikawa's soldiers, keeping only the pink-haired girl, because she looked quite cute. Bisco began to interrogate her. Just then, Milo's sister on a scooter. Bisco quickly used fungi to flip the vehicle up, but Milo's sister didn't flinch, charging straight in to attack. From behind the smoke, Bisco drew his bow and shot an arrow that pierced through the weapon in her hand, the sound of metal shattering echoing throughout the space, signaling that a new confrontation was about to begin. The town speakers were broadcasting warnings about mold. People were advised to take protective measures to avoid inhaling fungal spores. The girls at the brothel were buzzing with discussion about the enormous giant mushrooms that had recently sprouted. Having lived for 2 or 3 decades, it was the first time they had seen anything like this. The madam hurriedly urged the girls to go inside to avoid inhaling the spores. Suddenly, someone from below reported the terrible news that the panda clinic had just been destroyed. This news made the madam extremely worried, as that clinic had the young man Milo, someone she always cared about. Meanwhile, on Milo's side, he was giving a blood transfusion to Bisco's grandfather. The old man due to the corrosive rust disease. Thanks to the blood being transfused, the old man gradually regained consciousness. However, there was still the harsh truth that his body had been corroded too much by rust. He could only live for another month before vital organs were completely destroyed. Nevertheless, he maintained his composure. He praised Milo's skills, saying this young man had skillful hands, both delicate and patient. Then he introduced himself as Jabai, Bisco's master. Outside, the battle between Bisco and Milo's sister was intensely unfolding. They charged at each other, launching fierce attacks, the sound of clashing metal and growls making the atmosphere heavy. Although Bisco was attacking, he continuously advised Milo's sister to stop. As each time she struck, the rust on her body spread wider, meaning death was drawing nearer. But Milo's sister didn't care at all. In her eyes, there was only hatred. She firmly believed that Bisco was the cause of the rust's appearance and spread, and therefore she couldn't stop. Bisco trying to convince her, but the anger in Milo's sister's heart was too great, preventing those words from reaching her ears. While the two were busy fighting, elsewhere, Jabai was telling Milo a truth that few knew, that fungi don't spread rust as people thought. On the contrary, fungi eat rust to survive and grow. He further explained that this world was inherently harsh and cruel, which is why organisms had to evolve to adapt, and fungi were the first species to evolve this special ability. He recounted that for a long time, people like him had tried planting fungi on body parts or objects affected by rust, and over time, the fungi gradually absorbed and purified the rust. But because the change happened slowly, outsiders only saw fungi growing from patches of rust, and hastily concluded that fungi were the cause. This misunderstanding grew larger, especially when those who protected fungi weren't good at explaining, causing the world to misunderstand and despise them. However, Jabai's sincere words still couldn't move Milo's sister. Threw her vehicle at Bisco, causing him to be flung far away. Bisco, in pain, still tried to explain that he only planted fungi on rusted areas to treat them, and had never demanded gratitude from anyone. Yet he was misunderstood, beaten, treated as an enemy. Clearly, he was upset, feeling hurt, but remained patient. Milo's sister was different. She only wanted to know Bisco's true purpose. When pressed, Bisco was forced to admit that both he and Jabai were looking for an extremely rare rust-eating fungus, considered a miracle remedy that could cure rust at its root anywhere. Milo's sister, Pawu, hearing this, became even more angry, believing it was all just an excuse. But Bisco didn't care. He even excitedly boasted that he had just found a skilled doctor here, someone who looked very much like Pawu, making him guess they must be blood relatives. That statement was like pouring oil on fire. Pawu became enraged, frantically charging to smash the entire wall section where Bisco stood. But this time, he used Milo himself to provoke her, to draw her into his trap. In her anger, Pawu attacked more fiercely, and it was at that moment that Bisco skillfully planted fungi to grow in her weapon. Seeing this, he couldn't help but feel bitter, because his job had always been to plant fungi to save people, not to use them to counterattack a girl. But the battle had forced him to do so. Finally, Bisco shot a sedative arrow, then quickly caught Pawu's body as she fell. Not wanting her to get hurt, he gently carried her, bringing her back to the underground sewer hideout. There, Bisco met his grandfather again, who no longer looked like a bumbling old man, but appeared full of health like an 18-year-old, moving Bisco to the point of almost crying despite trying to hold back. Milo also rushed over, frightened to see his sister unconscious. Bisco reassured him that she had only been injected with sedatives and would wake up shortly. Milo had already injected her with rust inhibitor medication, giving her more time. The situation was now even more. The guards were about to arrive. Jabai decided to volunteer to stay behind to block them, buying time for the youngsters to escape. Bisco disagreed, understanding that without his grandfather, there would be no one who could prepare the medicine. At this point, Milo unexpectedly stepped forward, asserting that he could substitute, that he would learn and do it with complete determination. Bisco objected, believing the outside world was too harsh for someone like Milo. But Milo remained firm, as he not only wanted to treat, but also wanted to find a cure to save the last of his family. Seeing that determined look in his eyes, Bisco finally nodded in agreement to let Milo come along. Just then, the guards arrived, forcing Jabai to stand in their way. Milo decided to leave his sister behind, placing beside her a bag of rust inhibitor medicine to sustain her life. The farewell scene was full of choked emotions, but before it could end, Bisco had already pulled Milo away forcefully. As time was running out, they rushed toward the gate, but right there they were. Another group of guards approached from behind, trapping them both. Bisco quickly drew his bow and shot a special arrow. The bridge in front collapsed, taking them both falling from the city gate. In that moment, amidst all the dangers, there remained only a fragile hope that they would continue to survive and walk on the thorny path ahead. On the first day outside, Milo talked continuously, chattering non-stop about various things, irritating Bisco, whose face was always frowning. Milo carelessly thought that perhaps they had lost their way, but Bisco adamantly refused to admit it. The pride of someone born accustomed to wandering, who had lived by free instinct in nature, wouldn't allow him to acknowledge that he had gone the wrong direction. The two continued walking until they reached a place with algae floating on the water surface. Milo was immediately fascinated, his eyes bright. He stopped to look, curious as if discovering something magical. But Bisco was different. He was annoyed and impatient, casually throwing something at Milo's face, startling him. It him that they weren't out for fun, that this place with algae would attract wild beasts at night, and if they lingered, danger could strike at any moment. The two left the area and continued on, but not long after, Milo fainted on the road. Bisco sighed helplessly, then returned with two baby lizards in hand, which were still playing, biting each other's tails off. Bisco roasted them for Milo to eat, as he had fainted simply from extreme hunger. After eating, Milo became alert again. Both understood that time was running short, as Jabai could only live for another month, while the medicine Milo had left for his sister would only last for 3 months. Realizing the urgency, Bisco took out a map, clearly marked their route, and said they would cross a coal mine. Milo immediately worried, as he knew giant dangerous rats often inhabited coal mines, but Bisco reassured him that he had a way to deal with them. Just then, Bisco found a giant crab claw protruding from under the sand. He whistled, and from beneath the thick sand, their third. It was Bisco's crab. Milo suddenly understood that the reason they had initially gone off course was because Bisco had been searching for this crab, as it often buried itself in sand to sleep. According to estimates, if they rode the crab, it would take only 2 days to reach the mine, and the rats in the mine wouldn't be foolish enough to attack such a large creature. But just as Milo hadn't even settled properly on the crab's back, he was thrown to the ground. Bisco just shrugged and tossed Milo a special outfit to wear to help the crab feel less strange. However, this crab seemed unusually intelligent. Although Milo had put on the clothes, it still casually threw him off. Milo had to walk, trailing behind Bisco and the crab. By the afternoon, he tried to climb onto its back again. The second attempt seemed more promising, but he was still thrown off. This continued, with Milo trying again and again many times, to the point where the crab spun around, making him dizzy, seeing everything darken and then brighten again. The next morning, while Milo practicing riding the crab, Bisco sat preparing a poisonous fungal solution to soak his arrows. Suddenly, someone appeared. Milo braked sharply, was thrown in front of a girl, and coincidentally, it was the pink-haired girl that Bisco had encountered before. She looked at Milo with eyes both curious and teasing, complimenting him on having such a big crab. Bisco heard the shouting, turned around to see that same girl climbing onto the crab's back. While Milo was clinging to its claw, Bisco immediately used a fungus-soaked arrow to fire a warning, his eyes full of threat. An arrow hit the girl's thigh, causing her intense pain, but she still laughed mockingly. It turned out she wanted to lure Milo, promising to show him how to ride the crab, but actually intended to steal it. Milo at that moment unexpectedly did something different. He talked to the crab, asking it to bend down so he could apply medicine, and surprisingly, the crab actually obeyed. Bisco was amazed, as Milo, though unable to ride it, had made the crab cooperate. Bisco changed his plan. Milo no longer needed to practice riding, and the three continued their journey together. That evening, they stopped to rest at a temple on the mountain. Here, surprisingly, they encountered the pink-haired girl again. She looked uncomfortable, seemingly choking on something in her throat. Milo quickly ran over, patting her back to help her vomit it out, but it wasn't enough. In a reckless action, Milo pressed his lips to hers, like a forced kiss, to extract a chrysalis from her throat. Milo explained that it was a type of chrysalis commonly used to control slaves, preventing them from escaping. The girl initially thought both of them had helped her only because they desired her pristine body, but Bisco coldly said he wasn't interested at all. Hearing this, Milo blushed with embarrassment, and was immediately teased by Bisco for being a virgin. Bisco's anger almost made him draw an arrow to shoot at her, while Milo calmly said he just wanted some food. Finally, the pink-haired girl opened her bag, laying it out in front of both of them. Milo chose a packet of crackers, while Bisco chose some arrows. The girl then demanded payment, irritating Bisco, but Milo still agreed to pay. He even happily offered Bisco a taste of the crackers, and both found the flavor excellent. However, when it came to gasoline, she didn't want to sell it, even pouring it out right in front of them. That night, a sudden earthquake occurred. Bisco woke with a start, while Milo was riding the crab, fleeing. Bisco discovered he was now lying on the back of a giant insect. Milo shouted that it was a living fortress. If it rammed into the coal mine, the entire mine would explode. Bisco knew well that this species was a bone-eating bug, and it had awakened due to the pink-haired girl's spilled gasoline. Bisco shouted loudly, showing Milo how to direct the crab to hit the bug's head to stop it. But at that moment, he was held tightly by the pink-haired girl, unable to move. Milo had wholeheartedly pleaded with the crab, and it obeyed, jumping up to stab straight into the bug's head. Bisco managed to roll with him, then shot a fungus-soaked arrow into the bug's skull. Immediately, fungi spread, the bug paused, and then collapsed dead. The group fortunately stopped just before the coal mine, but before they could catch their breath, a shell from somewhere was fired at them, causing the entire mine area to explode. They were forced to find another route around. The next morning, upon waking, Milo reported that the pink-haired girl had fled with both their money, but at least she had left some food, showing she had some conscience. Bisco looked at Milo, realizing he had become quite adept at riding the crab, despite his hands being full of injuries. This proved that Milo had been practicing very diligently. Bisco nodded slightly, showing admiration, and then they both continued their journey. After regaining consciousness, Pawu immediately climbed onto her large motorcycle, started the engine, and sped away very quickly. She followed the remaining traces, with only one thought in mind: she had to find Milo. Meanwhile, Milo and Bisco were in a both suddenly surrounded by a group of children carrying guns and sticks, who all rushed to attack as if they had been ambushing them all along. Those aggressive kids thought Milo and Bisco were Kirikawa's henchmen, so they continuously attacked. Both had to quickly raise their hands and try to explain that they were not that man's people at all. But the children still adamantly refused to believe them. Milo said he just wanted to buy some food to survive, his voice clearly showing sincerity. But the kids were still skeptical. They looked at the tattered clothes, dirty faces, and impoverished appearance of Milo and Bisco and snickered, because in their eyes, how could these two ragged paupers have money to buy anything? The children's vigilant attitude hadn't decreased at all. Guns and sticks still pointed directly at them. In that situation, Bisco reluctantly took out his own wanted poster, a crumpled paper but clearly printing his face and the attractive bounty, to prove that they were really not related to Kirikawa. Only when they saw that wanted poster did the kids become less agreeing not to attack anymore, but they still wouldn't let them go free. Not long after, Milo and Bisco were escorted, quickly tied up, and taken away. Bisco seemed quite calm, even smiling coldly and promising that he would let them turn him in for the reward if they wanted, because he had nothing left to lose. Both were taken to the children's shelter, a ruined area crudely covered with wood and scrap metal, then imprisoned in a damp room. Meanwhile, Pawu happened to pass by an abandoned apartment complex, a place full of corpses scattered throughout corridors and staircases, the thick stench of death making the air suffocating. There, she had timely intervened to save an elderly couple being attacked by a giant spider. After being rescued, the elderly couple, panting, recounted that the corpses scattered around were all victims of bandits, people who regularly intercepted and robbed goods and valuables from merchants passing by. In gratitude, the elderly couple invited Milo's sister to their home, a small, shabby but clean house, promised her broken motorcycle. During this time, Milo was being detained with a little girl who seemed more understanding than the other kids. The girl appeared gentle, bringing food to Milo and advising him to eat to regain strength. Due to this gentle attitude, Milo sensed that the girl didn't see him as a bad person. While talking, the girl told Milo about the life of the children there. Each winter, they all had to face a kind of monster they called the Devil Kids, creatures that often came to harass them, spreading fear and pain. When observing carefully, Milo noticed patches of white scales on the girl's arm. When he asked about it, the girl told him that one day, Kirikawa had appeared in this place, declaring that the children had been infected with the rust disease, so the adults had to work for him to earn money to buy medicine for treatment. After hearing this, Milo immediately realized it was a lie, as the marks on the girl's arm were not the rust disease as he had claimed. Meanwhile, after Pawu arrived at the elderly couple's house, they told her an old story about how crowded town where people gradually began to suffer from the terrible rust disease. One day, someone calling himself a fungi protector appeared, boasting that he could cure the disease. Initially, the disease did show signs of improvement, making people believe and be grateful to him. However, later on, one by one, people died again, their bodies decaying because rust spread throughout their bodies. Before leaving, the self-proclaimed protector coldly said that it was all just an experiment. Hearing this, hatred welled up in Pawu's heart, her hatred for the so-called fungi protector growing stronger. She borrowed tools from the elderly couple and fixed her motorcycle herself. However, while working, she heard strange sounds coming from a nearby cave. With a bad feeling, she went in to check and was shocked to discover the cave was full of dry bones and corpses. The truth was that the elderly couple were actually sick murderers, killing people to satisfy their cruel pleasure. They even intended to turn her into a mannequin. When she discovered them, they seemed believing she had drunk the poison they had put in her meal earlier, but surprisingly, she had already sensed their plot and hadn't drunk it. Just as she was about to counterattack, a corpse suddenly lunged from the darkness, its mouth spewing a toxic smoke that made the space foggy. She quickly escaped, while the elderly couple, knowing they couldn't win, decided to execute their final plan. They set fire to explode the entire cave, choosing to die together, taking everything into the sea of flames. Meanwhile, Bisco was locked in another corner. He noticed some spears propped in the corner of the wall that looked quite good and asked for them. Because of this, the two kids guarding him told him about their parents, who were once gentle fishermen but were all killed for opposing Kirikawa. When Bisco expressed his desire to have that spear, the kid holding the gun became angry, intending to pull the trigger and shoot, but finally stopped out of fear of losing the bounty if they accidentally killed Bisco. Not long after, the group of kids rushed in, boasting that Milo had cured which somewhat eased the tense atmosphere. From the initial two guards, now only one remained, intently looking at an old, tattered map. Bisco immediately said he knew that place well, then enthusiastically recounted how he was once saved by a fungi protector, and therefore now wanted to repay the favor. The boy then handed the map to Bisco, then ran off to relieve himself, leaving Bisco alone in the cell. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Bisco quickly removed his handcuffs and chains. At the same time, Milo not only treated the disease but also carefully prescribed medication, instructed how to prepare it, and gave specific guidance to the children. Grateful to him, the kids wanted to repay him, but when Milo asked them to release Bisco, the group leader firmly refused, as he believed they needed money to buy weapons to fight against the pufferfish school before winter came. Just as the words ended, a giant pufferfish school arrived. Looking for food, one of them quickly caught the group leader. Bisco immediately rushed out to swing the spear forcefully, cutting the pufferfish in half with just one clean move. Though it was unfortunate there was no rice to make fish salad with. Bisco promised to help the children overcome the danger, but admitted that he couldn't read. Therefore, each time he shot an arrow at the map, the guard boy had to read the place name to Bisco. By the time the map was fully read, the pufferfish school had retreated. Bisco then called his giant crab to come, riding it to pick up Milo. As Milo was preparing to leave, the understanding little girl held him back, pleading that the town needed someone like him. But Milo just smiled, saying he had passed enough medical knowledge to the girl, and believed that she would become his replacement to heal and save people. Before parting, the group leader boy threw Bisco the spear left by his father, though still maintaining a cold demeanor and saying he wanted to test if Bisco had the ability to take his life. This action was actually an implicit trust. Meanwhile, Kirikawa was still frantically hunting, using all his dabai, but still hadn't caught him. Suddenly, he signaled his subordinates to stop. Bending down, he approached someone standing at the end of the line, his face clearly showing suspicion. He forcefully pulled off the hat covering the person's head and immediately revealed the true face. It was Jabai in disguise. Bisco and Milo were now passing through a vast snowy region, the cold wind biting so fiercely that each step felt twice as heavy. Milo was shivering from head to toe, his breath turning into white mist, almost unable to move properly because the cold seemed to penetrate into his bones. Bisco didn't seem to mind much, instead laughing mockingly, his eyes sparkling with disdain when he saw Milo struggling. His laughter echoing in the silent space made Milo blush with embarrassment. While trying to walk, both suddenly discovered a white rabbit hopping in the thick snow. Bisco immediately drew his bow intending to take it down, but Milo unexpectedly intervened, quickly seizing the opportunity. He pulled the bowstring tight, but due to his trembling hands, the arrow veered off course, missing the rabbit. However, instead of being useless, the arrow spread out into a net, causing the rabbit to get trapped. Bisco was momentarily surprised, while Milo smiled and explained that he had crafted special arrows by utilizing spider silk, both creative and useful. Bisco coldly snorted, saying it was just a form of cheating, but clearly in his eyes there was a look acknowledging Milo's ingenuity. They hadn't gone far when they encountered the pink-haired girl from before, frozen in a thick layer of ice, her body almost immobile. The two quickly brought her into a small nearby cave to warm up. Milo wondered how she could have reached this place before them, and she sighed, explaining that she had repaired an old helicopter in the temple, flown over here, but unfortunately was shot down by the army's anti-aircraft guns. Hearing this, Bisco immediately made a bitter remark that it was karma, that those who do good meet good, while those who do evil only await retribution. Angrily rebutted, claiming she had never intentionally created bad karma, that it was all due to fate forcing her, the currents of life pushing her from one calamity to another. Her words were tinged with despair. She even murmured that perhaps she should just die and be done with it. Bisco lifted a hot piece of metal and pressed it against her forehead as if to test her resolve, causing her to immediately scream and curse, trembling with anger. But this very reaction proved she didn't really want to die. After recovering somewhat, the three continued their journey. But Bisco didn't like having an additional companion. He and the pink-haired girl constantly argued, their bickering making even the giant crab annoyed, which used its claws to throw both of them to the ground as a warning. Finally, the group stopped at a merchant camp, but there no one used tacky currency anymore, preventing them from buying anything. The merchant suggested they would only trade if they left the crab behind, which Bisco immediately rejected. While at an impasse, the pink-haired girl demonstrated her feminine charms. She negotiated that just a few canned goods would be enough to exchange for necessary food and supplies. Traveling on, the group arrived at an abandoned train station, with the entrance covered by snow and ice. This time, the giant crab stepped in, using its strength to break through the thick ice layer, opening a path down below. The space was pitch black, but thanks to Bisco blowing out luminescent fungi, a mystical blue-purple light spread everywhere, making Milo feel as if he had entered another world. They found some old locomotives. Fortunately, one still worked, but the control panel required inserting yen coins, a currency long abandoned. The pink-haired girl again proved her resourcefulness, prying open the machine cover, reconnecting complex electrical wires. When Milo and Bisco looked on in amazement, she recounted that in the past, she had been captured as a slave, forced to work in a machinery factory where many people were corroded by rust. It was during those days that she became proficient with machinery and decided to live. While she was busy repairing, Milo and Bisco sat by the fire, sharing some hot food. Milo confided that he felt happy traveling with Bisco, experiencing so many new things, gaining more motivation to find medicine to save people. He asked Bisco about his grandfather, and Bisco explained that although not his biological grandfather, he was his only family, also the master who taught him everything from archery to survival. Those harsh lessons had many times pushed him to the brink between life and death, but it was because of that bond that Bisco was determined to save him at all costs. The story made Milo silent, then he whispered that it was love, the attachment that made people so courageous. The pink-haired girl overheard, her face turning red, both embarrassed and confused, yet quietly smiling. Finally, she finished fixing the locomotive. As Milo and Bisco prepared to board the train, the pink-haired girl hesitated, deciding not to go with them due to fears of danger. They didn't force her, just asked for her name, but afraid of leaving traces. Milo promised not to laugh, causing her to hesitate before softly saying her name was Tyrol. Milo smiled and complimented her beautiful name, moving her unexpectedly. As the train started rolling, Milo promised they would meet again and tell her about their journey. Tyrol wanted to thank them for treating her as a friend, but was too shy and kept it to herself. However, the peace didn't last long. A school of giant octopuses suddenly appeared, fiercely attacking the train. Bisco immediately jumped into battle, trusting Milo to provide support. Initially Milo was clumsy, but together they defeated the smaller ones, until the giant octopus appeared, extending its tentacles to tightly wrap around Bisco. Milo ordered the crab to throw the engine into its mouth, but his hands still trembled when aiming. Bisco then stood shoulder to shoulder with him, adjusting his aim, both pulling the bow together. The arrow flew, hitting the engine, causing a violent explosion, destroying the monster. Having the train advanced to the target valley. This was the place where the fungi protectors had set foot, also where the type of fungi they needed to find was located. The scenery down there was beautiful. Suddenly they saw a giant bird carrying an octopus flying across the sky. But right after that, a giant snake emerged, swallowing both animals whole. Recognizing it as the species of snake carrying the rust-eating fungi, Bisco immediately swung on a rope to attack. But all his strikes were ineffective. In the midst of the tense situation, Milo's sister, Pawu, unexpectedly appeared, looking full of killing intent. Pawu suddenly appeared from somewhere, looking very tense. She demanded that Bisco return her brother to her. But Bisco calmly replied that Milo had voluntarily followed him, that he wanted to save his sister with his own strength, and was not being forced. Milo nodded in agreement, but his sister was still full of anger, refusing to listen. Bisco, with his hot-tempered nature, deliberately provoked Pawu, making even more. The exchange of words put all three in an uncomfortably tense atmosphere. At that moment, the giant snake suddenly lunged forward. Its target this time was them. Pawu quickly reversed her vehicle to avoid it, but the unexpected attack was so powerful that she was still tightly wrapped and dragged away. Milo panicked, hurriedly rode the crab forward, shouting loudly for his sister. With a risky collaboration, Milo directed the vehicle to charge straight into the snake, forcing it to loosen its grip and release Pawu. Bisco quickly caught her, helping her escape the danger. But just as the two jumped to the ground, the snake unexpectedly wrapped around the crab's claw, gripping it tightly and not letting go. Bisco was tense, continuously drawing his bow and shooting arrows, but the snake seemed unharmed. Milo then shouted, begging Bisco to trust him. He pulled the bowstring tight, aimed carefully, and shot straight, the arrow hitting a vulnerable spot, cutting off the crab's claw that was being tightly held. But Milo now stood right in front of the giant snake's mouth. In that life-or-death moment, both Bisco and Pawu acted simultaneously. She charged straight ahead on her motorcycle, while Bisco jumped up to grab Milo. Both fell down, completely swallowed into the monster's mouth. Inside the snake's body, Milo and Bisco quickly stuffed a pile of fungi into its mouth. When the fungi violently exploded, Bisco used Pawu's own weapon to stab through from the inside, breaking the snake's skull. The two escaped with a decisive jump, falling safely to the ground, drenched in sweat, but their eyes still shining with determination. Reunited with his sister, Milo finally managed to explain everything, making her understand that he went with Bisco to save her, not because he was forced. They looked at the snake's corpse together, noticing a strange type of fungus growing on its body. Milo was certain this was the rust-eating fungus they had been searching for all along. Bisco plucked a mushroom and tried eating it, but it was no different from ordinary mushrooms. He had gone in the wrong direction. Unwilling to give up, Bisco decided to find another snake to verify, believing he couldn't return empty-handed after so much effort. Milo wanted him to get treatment first, but Bisco wouldn't listen, even pushing Milo away. At that moment, Milo discovered something unusual. He placed Bisco's bloodied hand on the mushroom, and immediately the mushroom reacted strangely. Seeing this, Bisco finally allowed Milo to bandage his wound. Milo curiously asked about Bisco's blood type, but he didn't know what a blood type was. Milo recalled his grandfather saying exactly the same thing and realized that the fungi protectors didn't have much medical knowledge. From this, Milo began to suspect that the blood of fungi protectors contained a special component, which was what allowed the rust-eating fungi to be effective. With an idea flashing in his mind, Milo hesitantly said he wanted to ask Bisco for some blood for experimentation. Pawu observed the conversation, gradually changing her view of Bisco and the fungi. She silently looked at Bisco, making the young man embarrassed, blushing, quickly turning away. To avoid the tense atmosphere, she stepped outside to fix her vehicle. But while busy working, she suddenly saw several metal wires dropping from above, hooking firmly onto the snake's corpse. Looking up, she was startled to realize that Kirikawa had been following them for a long time. He made no attempt to hide, bluntly declaring that he had used their group to find the rust-eating fungi. His intention was to seize this fungus and sell it to the government at a high price. Bisco immediately drew his bow, shooting arrows at the balloon where Kirikawa stood. But all arrows were ineffective as the balloon was covered with an antifungal membrane. His henchmen began to mock, believing Bisco was too weak. The wound prevented him from doing anything. But Bisco disregarded this, jumping up to shoot an arrow directly through the control room's glass. At that moment, Kirikawa counterattacked, shooting a rust bullet straight into Bisco's stomach. He collapsed, but his eyes still blazing with determination. Having obtained what he wanted, Kirikawa quickly ordered a retreat, abandoning everything behind. The next morning, things calmed down again. Pawu realized she couldn't do anything more than entrust her brother to Bisco. She trusted and handed Milo over to him, then returned alone. Before leaving, Milo gave his sister 2 doses of medicine, one for her to take back to the town, one for Bisco's grandfather. But she gave up her portion for Bisco, as his wound was too severe. Without treatment, it would quickly spread. Bisco, for the first time, softly called her by name, Pawu, moving her emotionally. She smiled in appreciation, making him blush deeply. Pawu then returned to the camp but was horrified to discover that the soldiers under her command had all been controlled. She immediately fell into a trap, captured by Kirikawa. He even brought out Bisco's grandfather as a hostage, making the situation desperate. Meanwhile, Milo and Bisco were resting in a fully equipped. Instead of resting, Bisco was busy playing with the crab, ignoring his own wound, even pushing all tasks onto Milo. Milo was both angry and worried, cooking while grumbling irritably. At that moment, Kirikawa's news broadcast on TV made Milo's face turn pale. When Bisco returned, Milo tried to appear calm, but his eyes couldn't hide his unease. Bisco noticed something strange, tasted the food Milo had just cooked, and immediately discovered it contained sleeping medicine. He suspected Milo was hiding something from him, then guessed that Pawu was in danger. Bisco asserted he knew where she was being held and wanted to go rescue her immediately, but Milo stopped him, saying that with his severe wound condition, Bisco couldn't risk it. Bisco ignored this, leading to a fierce argument between the two. Milo even raised the bow and arrow to threaten Bisco. Milo choked up, saying he couldn't let Bisco take risks just because they were close friends, that all responsibility couldn't be placed on one person's shoulders. Silently took out the data he had prepared in advance and the antidote, his eyes determined, ready to face challenges alongside his friend. But he was quickly knocked down by Bisco. Bisco felt he had been a bit too harsh. After all, Milo was his comrade. In a moment of lost focus, Bisco was injected with a dose by Milo. Then he fell asleep. After carefully tucking his friend into bed and covering him with a blanket, Milo set out alone. He was determined to rescue both his sister and Jabai. Kirikawa was relaxing in a luxurious room, drinking wine while playing cards with his subordinates. The pale yellow light cast down made the scene even more sinister. The game was too easy, making him gradually feel bored. His contemptuous laughter echoed in the silent space. Suddenly, from the darkness, Milo appeared, bow already drawn. He coldly aimed directly at Kirikawa, his eyes filled with hatred. Milo was still haunted by the image of his sister being tortured, which Kirikawa had deliberately broadcast in full HD through the TV screen yesterday, along with the vicious threat that if he wanted to save his sister and Jabai, he must obediently give the secret of the rust-eating fungi to him first. Milo gritted his teeth, demanding that he release his sister first before discussing anything else. But Kirikawa smirked, flatly refusing. He believed that if he handed over the person first, what if Milo took his sister and ran away? Who could stop him? With no other choice, Milo was forced to act out a play, taking out several medicine vials, pretending to prepare a formula. Kirikawa initially showed interest, his eyes brightening at the thought of soon having unlimited power in his hands, but everything Milo did was just a trick. Kirikawa was surprised when he realized it was all an elaborate deception. The test tube in Milo's hands smoked, a dense red smoke spreading throughout the room. This smoke contained a paralyzing agent, causing the strong henchman to tremble and collapse helplessly in the blink of an eye. Milo didn't miss the opportunity. He shot arrows to take down each soldier, each shot precise. Afterward, Milo went behind Kirikawa, drew his knife, and stabbed him repeatedly. This was his revenge for what his sister had endured. For a moment, Milo thought he had succeeded and could leave. But no, Kirikawa wasn't easily defeated. With his inherent cunning, he suddenly stabbed Milo back with a fatal blow. Blood poured out. Milo looked down in disbelief, realizing he had been counterattacked. Not stopping there, he also used a special arrow to shoot Milo. That arrow contained toxins, gradually taking control of Milo's body, causing him to almost lose control of himself. Kirikawa gave an evil smile, revealing a shocking secret that he was once a fungi protector, so he understood how they worked. With the rust-eating fungi formula in hand, he would become the strongest, most powerful, far surpassing all others. He ordered Milo to reveal the secret, or else he would turn him into a puppet like those soulless soldiers. Milo gritted his teeth, ignoring, absolutely refusing to tell. Kirikawa became angrier, preparing to add another arrow. Suddenly, from afar, Bisco unexpectedly appeared. Jabai at this time had also been pretending to be stupid to find an opportunity. While imprisoned, he cleverly used a rat, self-made a lock-breaking solution, opening an escape route. Kirikawa was bitter, pointing his crossbow at Bisco, mouth continuously mocking. Bisco still provoked back, forcing Kirikawa to reveal the truth that it was he who had spread rumors that fungi protectors spread rust to divide people's hearts. Just as Kirikawa was about to pull the trigger, his arm holding the crossbow was shattered by Bisco's shot. However, Milo had now completely lost control, accidentally firing back, causing Bisco to be wounded. Kirikawa took the opportunity to force Milo to choose. He could only choose between revealing the secret or killing his traveling companion with his own hands. In this desperate situation, Milo finally had to reveal the secret lying in the blood of but Kirikawa was a complete fraud. As soon as he knew the truth, he immediately showed his true colors, ordering Milo to kill Bisco. The deadly arrow flew, but at that very moment, Bisco risked his life to catch it with his mouth and shot it back. The arrow pierced straight through Kirikawa's eye, making him scream. Right after that, mushrooms grew profusely on his body, spreading all over, forcing him to slam his head against the ceiling in a frenzy. It turned out it was all due to Jabai, Bisco's old master, who had acted from the shadows. He had activated the fungi to control Kirikawa, then quickly rescued Milo and Bisco out. Before leaving, he instructed both to run quickly, while he once again stayed behind to hold off the soldiers. Despite Bisco's objections, Jabai still firmly decided to stay, shooting arrows and sowing fungi, causing the counter-attacking soldiers to sink into a drug-induced high, unable to fight back effectively. After escaping outside, Milo began to collapse as the rust poisoned throughout his body. Seeing his friend gasping for breath, Bisco knelt down, feelings of helplessness and pain tearing his heart apart. At that moment, the loyal giant crab rushed over, sweeping away the remaining soldiers, protecting them both. Although severely wounded himself, Milo still held Bisco's hand, his trembling voice instructing Bisco not to let his death be in vain. Bisco, in pain, could only collapse beside his friend. Milo woke up in a hazy state. In a brief dream, he saw himself reunited with everyone, his sister, his grandfather, and friends, a small, warm party full of laughter. But that image grew increasingly distant, gradually fading like it was dissolving in mist. Milo awakened with a start, his breathing rapid, sweat beading on his forehead. His entire body was now tightly bandaged, each white strip wrapped so firmly that even a slight movement was painfully sharp. His eyes were covered by a thick bandage, making him feel disoriented as if he had permanently fallen into darkness. The thought that he might be like some kind of sound wave shadowless foot monk flashed through his mind, making Milo tremble with fear, imagining a life of struggling forever in darkness. Beside him, Bisco sat there, contemplative, but with a calm voice, reassuring Milo not to worry too much. He said he had obtained a precious mushroom from Pawu and was researching to prepare medicine, based on the formula that Milo himself had left. Milo hurriedly asked if Bisco had tested it on himself yet, hoping that he himself would be the first guinea pig, but Bisco just smiled, replying that he had already been a guinea pig for the medicine to the point of boredom. In reality, Bisco deliberately blindfolded Milo to hide the truth that the rust disease was still in his body, not gone at all. Milo fell silent, feeling guilty that his impulsiveness and hot temper had put them both in this situation. But Bisco gently suggested they hadn't necessarily lost, because after all, they had successfully rescued Jabai and Pawu. He consoled Milo that such wasn't enough for hope. But Milo still wasn't happy. He sighed and then suddenly suggested mischievously that Bisco should try dating his sister. Bisco jumped, his face reddening with fear, immediately remembering the scene where he was almost hit in the head with an iron rod by Milo's sister. The thought of dating that tough woman made him not dare to imagine further. Milo burst out laughing, then softly said that his sister was actually quite similar to Bisco, although strong on the outside. She was sensitive inside and had never had any experience with romance. Not only that, his sister was also one of the top beauties of the town. Hearing this, Bisco didn't know how to react, just mumbled and scratched his head. They looked at each other and laughed. Afterward, Milo, being too exhausted, gradually drifted into sleep. Bisco watched him sleep soundly, a sense of remorse rising within him. He didn't dare stay by Milo's side for too long, as he had become a burden and didn't want Milo to face more danger. Finally, Bisco made a painful decision here so that Milo could be safer. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Kurikawa was still pursuing his dark conspiracy. He had brought Jabai to an old warehouse, a gloomy place full of the smell of rust and machine oil. Here, Kurikawa coldly revealed his entire plan. Recently, the rust in the air had decreased significantly, and the number of infected people had also gradually diminished. This meant his power was also shaken. Therefore, Kurikawa planned to create artificial rust wind. He intended to melt a giant monster covered entirely in rust, then use rust bullets to shoot straight in the directions of the wind sources. When the wind carrying rust dust blew away, the whole land would again be immersed in epidemic. Not stopping there, he also declared he would exterminate the snake species in that valley, to prevent the rust-eating fungi from having a chance to develop. He kept Jabai alive, forcing him to return to the village of the fungi protectors to persuade the young generation to donate blood as material for medicine production. But Jabai firmly eyes bright, and suddenly used his own head to butt straight into Kurikawa's face, causing his nose to break, blood spurting in streams. The guards immediately rushed in to beat him severely. In his anger, Kurikawa drew a knife, intending to cut off the old man's fingers to force submission. But Jabai remained steadfast, not trembling with fear. Just as the blade was about to touch his skin, one of the soldiers suddenly betrayed, swinging his knife to cut the chains binding Jabai. He turned back to stab forcefully into Kurikawa's leg, causing him such pain that he had to remove his mask. At this moment, everyone was shocked. It turned out the traitor was actually Bisco in disguise. Not missing the opportunity, Bisco struck hard, knocking Kurikawa down, but the old fox still managed to escape death, rolling down to the basement. Jabai was shocked when he realized Bisco had also been infected with rust. But Bisco was calm, instructing his grandfather to find a way to destroy Kurikawa's cannon, while he would handle Kurikawa. They embraced each other tightly, like a final farewell, before Bisco jumped down to the basement for the final battle. Kurikawa immediately ordered his henchmen to bring the secret weapon. It was a giant with mental issues, hand brandishing a gun, frantically shooting wildly. Bisco quickly shot 2 arrows at his feet, causing the mold to explode, making the giant fall straight into the magma below. The battle unfolded tensely. When Bisco was preparing to finish off Kurikawa with his bow and arrow, he discovered his hand had been corroded by rust and could no longer pull the bow. Kurikawa laughed mockingly, showing triumph, but Bisco lunged forward, punching him straight in the face, growling that running was futile. He would hunt him to the end. The two fought fiercely. Despite being shot multiple times, Bisco still furiously advanced, knocking down each henchman, then rushed in to deliver a final punch that broke Kurikawa's face. Bisco's hand was bloody and rusted, but his eyes did not flinch. Kurikawa hurriedly reloaded, prepared. When Milo suddenly appeared, he shot an accurate arrow, knocking away Kurikawa's prosthetic arm. Bisco seized the opportunity to bite directly into his neck, then pinned him down into the molten rust. Kurikawa's screams echoed, then were quickly submerged in the bright red magma flow. The battle ended. Milo stood nearby, tears and mucus streaming, reproaching Bisco for why he had risked himself alone. He recalled the promise they had once sworn, but Bisco only handed Milo his bow, saying that his soul would exist within it. even when his body had been devoured by rust. He asked Milo to be the one to end his life, rather than letting rust take away this dignity. Milo trembled, his hand tightly gripping the bowstring, tears rolling down. In that moment of ultimate pain, he was forced to fulfill the final wish. The arrow left the bow, cutting through the wind to embed straight into Bisco's chest. His body gradually sank into the magma, but on his lips still lingered a relieved smile. Milo fell to his knees, despair, as his friend, his dear comrade, had departed forever. Then his mouth began to mutter that he loved Bisco. Jabai and Pawu were now directly facing a pack of giant chimpanzees, animals that had been deformed to the point where they hardly retained the original shape of primates. Their hoarse growls echoed throughout the factory area, making the space already chaotic with the sound of breaking metal and screaming machinery even more tense. Each step of the monster beasts treading on the cracked ground was like a threat, signaling the approaching madness. Behind them, Kurokawa's giant factory was also falling into an uncontrolled state, pipes violently shaking, heat billowing out thickly, and alarm sounds continuously ringing. The elephant-shaped cannon placed at the center of the factory now began to glow, its internal mechanism forcibly loading energy to prepare to fire the deadly rust ammunition, threatening the entire surrounding area. Jabai recognized the impending danger. He urgently said they must stop this cannon immediately, otherwise no chance of survival. In that tense moment, Pawu suddenly launched a powerful attack, instantly taking down the giant monkey that was lunging forward. With a decisive motion, she grabbed its heavy body and threw it straight at the elephant-shaped cannon. The extremely strong impact caused the entire giant mechanical elephant to stagger, shake violently, then topple over, the entire firing process forced to stop. Jabai, now 70 years old, couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this. His eyes reflected surprise mixed with admiration, along with a bit of relief seeing the danger temporarily halted. However, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, the entire factory began to shake more violently, consecutive explosions sounding from inside. Bright red flames burst out through the cracks, signaling the entire structure was about to explode violently. Pawu didn't have time to think much. She immediately rushed into the sea of fire and dust to search for Bisco. Her heart pounded continuously, each running step carrying a fragile still alive somewhere amidst the chaos. However, when she arrived, all she saw was Milo. The two quickly supported each other to run outside, barely escaping the factory that was collapsing in large sections behind them. They reunited with Jabai outside, who, as soon as he saw the two siblings, immediately asked about Bisco's whereabouts. Milo slightly bowed his head, his voice trembling as he answered that Bisco would now forever be in his heart. That brief but heavy statement made Jabai and Pawu immediately understand what had happened. They didn't need any further explanation. Just Milo's sad eyes and choked voice were enough to make both fall into silence. Pawu tightened her hand into a fist, her eyes reddening but unable to cry, while Jabai gently closed his eyes, sighing deeply as if to swallow all the pain inside. The atmosphere around them suddenly became heavy, as if all colors had been drained, leaving only bitter loss. By that afternoon, when the dust had gradually settled, the military and rescue teams finally immediately deployed their work, clearing the battlefield scattered with monster corpses and the remains left from the horrific explosion of the factory. Milo stood silently before the ashes, his eyes following the black smoke columns still rising steadily. Inside him welled up a feeling of emptiness, both painful and determined, as if the memory of Bisco would now forever become the guiding flame for him to move forward. Suddenly, from the ruins, a gigantic Iron Man unexpectedly rose. This Iron Man locked onto its target, which was to fire bullets at the Crying Children Valley. This valley was also where the rust-eating fungi existed, so it could be understood that this Iron Man wanted to exterminate the rust-eating fungi. Looking familiar, Milo immediately guessed that this Iron Man was actually the old Kurokawa. The army tried to shoot back at it, but to no avail. With just a few bursts of flame and a few steps, the Iron Man successfully cleared away the tanks blocking its path. Then the Iron Man began to change direction, heading toward the big Bisco's crab had been buried deep under the sand. Seeing Milo worried, Jabai said that this crab had the ability to resist rust, so Milo didn't need to worry. Milo had been injected with anti-rust medicine, so he volunteered to go stop the Iron Man. Jabai and Pawu stayed behind. They would follow him later. The pink-haired girl went to where Pawu had been kidnapped before. when suddenly she met some guard soldiers who had just escaped from being controlled by fungi. They looked at each other, not understanding what was happening, when suddenly military aircraft arrived. The aircraft came to find materials for the upcoming battle with the Iron Man. They said Bisco had died in the magma, shocking the girl severely. The Iron Man passed through that area. The army had fully equipped weapons to combat it, but no matter how hard they tried, it was useless. The Iron Man was almost unharmed. It only needed to sweep its cold gaze toward the army, choose a target, then spit out a deadly rust. After that moment, an entire platoon disappeared. Screams of terror. Guards nearby also wanted to rush in to support, but they fell into a state of hesitation. No one dared to make a decision. Everyone wanted to wait for instructions from Pawu. This hesitation made Milo look at the scene speechlessly, even anger rising in his heart at the cowardice of those who should have been responsible for protecting everyone. Meanwhile, the Iron Man casually walked, each step crushing everything, sowing a sense of helplessness across the battlefield. When it passed through the area of merchants trying to evacuate, Milo suddenly called out loudly. He called Kurikawa directly by name. The Iron Man immediately stopped, turning its head. The bright red eyes glowed from the gap in the steel mask. Then the metal arm raised, preparing to fire a deadly laser beam. In that moment, a bright red light shot straight toward Milo. His body immediately darted to one side, rolling to avoid it, feeling the heat of the energy stream pass close to his skin. Not allowing himself to fall into a passive position, Milo. Special arrows filled with fungal spores were shot continuously. Unlike useless bullets, fungi could corrode the Iron Man's armor, patches of metal beginning to rust unevenly. While shooting, he taunted, mocked, deliberately provoking anger to draw the enemy's attention toward himself. This created a valuable space for allies to have a chance to counterattack. At the most dangerous moment, a strong sound rang out from afar. Jabai appeared, riding on the back of the giant crab. Without hesitation, he shouted loudly, signaling for Milo to join forces. Both shot continuously, pouring all their strength into the Iron Man. His idea was very clear, they just needed to defeat and topple it, and they would win. Arrows carrying rust fungi rained onto the giant. However, the Iron Man still stood firm, seemingly not shaken at all. Instead of weakening, it roared fiercely, even more viciously than before. Suddenly, it threw its head back toward the sky. Milo shuddered momentarily, a sense of unease washing over him. Told him that the giant was about to do something terrible. The protagonist's intuition was correct. Right after the roar, a giant energy bomb was launched straight into the air, then plummeted right onto the heads of Milo's group and Jabai. Afterward, the entire group was immediately blown far away and engulfed in a firestorm. Pawu didn't understand why she happened to meet Tyrol by chance. The two quickly decided to team up, climbing into an old, but still quite sturdy red car, starting the engine and heading straight to where Milo was fighting. On the way, the atmosphere in the car was breathtakingly tense. Tyrol, who always carried various research materials with her, suddenly pulled out a detailed blueprint of the giant machine man created by Kurikawa. Pawu felt like she had struck gold. She reached out to grab it for a look, but her somewhat hasty and hurried action caused the car to lose control, nearly plunging off the roadside. Tyrol couldn't believe that this impulsive, hasty person was related to someone as calm as Milo. In another development, had escaped the horrific explosion earlier. They were still alive, but the price paid was not small. Jabai was severely injured in the leg and could no longer move quickly. Milo carefully helped him sit down, then quickly performed temporary first aid, bandaging to stop the bleeding. During their rest, Jabai began to explain. Rust was nothing short of destruction. It would corrode everything, including humans. The only thing that could fight against rust could only be rust-eating fungi. Milo clenched his fist and nodded. Afterward, he left Jabai with nearby merchants to care for him, instructed them to be careful, then climbed alone onto the back of the giant crab. Milo knew well that Kurikawa was heading toward the town, the place where he had memories with those children from before. At the same time, in the town, the kids from before were anxiously gathering. They wanted to discuss ways to protect their homeland. But one of them, the kid with a headband, who had a more realistic view than the others, spoke up advising the group they couldn't fight back. To save their lives. Later, they would still have a chance to rebuild. This advice made the whole group falter, and finally, they agreed to flee. Before leaving, they didn't forget to set some crude traps in hopes of slowing Kurikawa's advance. When Kurikawa arrived, He realized this and immediately became angry, roaring and chasing after the children. Seeing the danger, the commanding boy bravely volunteered to separate from the group, standing to hold off the monster to protect the others. But just as he was about to be hit by the deadly laser beam, surprisingly, a patch of bright red fungi burst open, shielding right in front of him. It was Milo. He quickly appeared, shooting arrows continuously, both fighting and deliberately provoking to draw all of Kuro's attention toward himself. The arrows soaked in spores continuously embedded into the armor of the machine man, spreading red smoke. Milo's mobility was considerable, as he had the giant crab for support. Whenever Milo jumped down, the crab immediately turned to catch him. Its back became Milo to move everywhere, both dodging and counterattacking with extreme agility. Just as the battle was becoming intense, Pawu and the guard troops appeared. They had hitchhiked in Tyrol's car and finally arrived in time. When she saw Milo was still alive, Tyrol was overjoyed, about to run right over, but Milo raised his hand to stop her. Now they needed to set everything aside to focus on combat. Milo still insisted on charging straight ahead, determined to stop Kurokawa. The group had to put aside all hesitation, rushing together, heading straight for the old town. There were also girls and the brothel madam there, preparing for a battle to the death. But the threat didn't stop there. Terrible news arrived that the Iron Man had appeared. On its way, it activated the giant propellers on its back, releasing extremely powerful gusts of rusty wind. That wind force caused military aircraft to fall like dry leaves. Even heavy tanks were overturned, becoming scrap metal. The entire battlefield became chaotic, all human weapons helpless. Fortunately, thanks to the crab, Milo's group still managed to stay alive. When the deadly wind swept through, the crab used its entire chubby form as a shield, even burying the group under the sand to avoid destruction. Only when Kurokawa left did it dig up, bringing everyone back to the surface. With no time to rest, Milo immediately injected more forbidden medicine to maintain strength. He entrusted his sister to Jabai and the others, instructing them to keep her safe. As for himself, once again he climbed onto the crab's back, tightened his bow and arrow, determined to pursue Kurokawa to the end. Meanwhile, Kurokawa directed the Iron Man straight toward the city wall. A barrage of artillery from the army fired continuously, but all were useless, leaving only patchy burn marks on the metal armor. Just as it was about to launch a destructive blow, Milo appeared, shooting an arrow to block it. People inside the city also saw this scene through live television broadcasts. They began to have would save this world. Milo and the crab charged into the attack. The crab activated its special ability, jumping high like a bird, creating conditions for Milo to continuously shoot arrows downward, causing red smoke to rise thickly. However, just one powerful swipe from the Iron Man was enough to flip the crab onto its back. Milo fell headlong, his eyes blurring and gradually losing consciousness. But he still had the legendary instinct for survival. While dying, his body still acted on instinct. Milo sprang up, using fungi as a springboard to gain momentum to jump onto the Iron Man's back. He drew his knife, repeatedly stabbing into its hard iron layer. Something was pulled out by him. Suddenly the Iron Man turned over, throwing Milo with one blow straight into the wall. A normal person would have gone to meet their ancestors long ago. Milo's sister was shocked, deeply concerned for her brother. Suddenly, from the place where Milo had just cut on the machine man, Bisco stuck his hand out. He had been reborn. It seemed illogical, but since this was anime, we'll just accept it for now. Bisco jumped off the machine man, flying toward Milo. Then he loudly announced that he had returned. When he was about to meet his ancestors, Bisco had heard Milo calling him. He took his hand, meeting his comrade in arms who he thought had returned to his ancestors. Milo felt incredibly moved. He nestled into Bisco's chest with teary eyes. At this moment, Bisco realized that his arm, which had been lost to rust, had recovered and was even more powerful than before. Just as their reunion was becoming emotional, old Kurokawa gave the young couple another disruptive punch. Bisco carried Milo away to dodge. He had become much stronger than before. He waved his hand once, and lots of rust-eating fungi sprouted, not just growing abundantly, but these fungi were also in their complete form. With that technique, Bisco cut Kurokawa's upper body in half like Master Gojo. Having been resurrected, Bisco felt a surge of power within him. With final boss power, Kurokawa's upper body could still function. He began to remove all his components, leaving only the mask. Milo started to make a decision. He and Bisco prepared to charge straight up to finish off Kurakawa once and for all. Jabai, with a determined look, placed his hand on Milo's shoulder, signaling him to come along. He gave the bow and arrows to the two, encouraging them to give their all for this final battle. Receiving that spiritual reinforcement, both Milo and Bisco simultaneously rushed forward. In Milo's heart, he suddenly thought back to the strange fungal particles from years ago, which had once merged with the blood of the giant snake. When combined with Bisco's bloodstream, they seemed to have transformed and made him become a complete fungi creator. It was this special fungi that had the ability to corrode and fundamentally counter the deadly rust. He didn't fully understand that transformation, but Milo knew for sure it was their last chance. Bisco casually replied that they didn't need to understand deeply yet. First and think later. While the group was preparing, Kurakawa's body suddenly began to abnormally expand, the iron shell growling and creaking. Tyrol frantically ran over, shouting a warning. "Wait, don't attack, the Iron Man is expanding and about to explode. Just one strong impact right now will trigger the explosion. The entire area will be blown to dust." The warning made everyone pause. No one dared to act recklessly. Bisco hurriedly erected a thick fungal wall to temporarily block the rust airstream that Kurakawa was releasing, maintaining a safe distance. Everyone immediately urged Tyrol to find a way to handle it, as time was running out. Tyrol's hands trembled as she flipped through the old design book, searching through each line of text. After a tense moment, she finally exclaimed that there was only one way: to kill the controller inside the Iron Man's head. If he died, the explosion process would stop. Hearing this, Bisco was about to charge forward immediately, but Milo stopped him. He clearly shoot randomly without accurately determining the position. One misplaced arrow would trigger an immediate explosion. While everyone was hesitating, Pawu roared and volunteered, but Jabai immediately stopped her, asserting that he and Bisco would take on this dangerous part. Pawu shook her head in opposition. If Jabai's crab claw struck too hard, it could create destabilizing shock waves, causing Kurakawa's entire body to explode immediately. She raised her head high, boldly saying she had trained in force-based martial arts and would deliver an armor-piercing strike without damaging the body. She herself would break his mask. Hearing this, Bisco laughed, quipping that he had been beaten to a pulp by her before, so he would admit she was strong. Bisco gave her a sharp glance, but before he could react, Pawu had already cut in, saying in a deep voice for him to stop being so sarcastic. She was in imminent danger. Despite his caustic tone, Bisco nodded, this time speaking sincerely. If she could do it, whatever she wanted. Unexpectedly, Pawu blushed, approached to plant a quick kiss on Bisco's cheek, considering it an advance payment. Bisco was stunned, while Milo burst out laughing, even firmly promising that he would have a wonderful wife. Hearing this, Tyrol made an excuse that the matter was settled to back away, avoiding the danger zone. Finally, Pawu was thrown straight forward by Bisco and the guard troops. She glided through the deadly rust streams, dodging closely, then delivered a thunderous strike directly to Kurakawa's mask. A bang sounded, the mask layer shattered. But immediately afterward, a fierce counterattack sent Pawu flying down, fortunately saved by Bisco's quick creation of fungi to catch her. The mask fell off, revealing old Kurakawa's true form. He immediately fired a deadly energy beam toward Pawu, but Milo, quick as lightning, erected a fungal wall as a shield. Bisco drew his bow, but each arrow was countered by the old man with a different energy beam. During this time, Bisco jumped his bow to deliver the final blow. Unexpectedly, a light beam grazed his eye, making his vision blurry, almost completely losing sight. In that life or death moment, Milo rushed over to firmly hold the bowstring for Bisco, telling him to trust him. Trusting his teammate, Bisco released the arrow. The light beam shot straight through Kurakawa's head, activating the fungi's energy to spread. Numerous fungal fibers erupted, extending outward, clinging to his body and the Iron Man, squeezing tightly, finally crushing everything in an explosion. Patches of rust throughout the land were devoured by fungi, completely neutralized. With this amount of fungi, they had enough medicine to treat all the sick people in the entire country. The rust marks on Pawu's face completely disappeared. Old Jabai sighed in relief, happily realizing Bisco was still alive, just unconscious and resting. After the battle, Milo sat beside Bisco, softly making him promise never to leave him again. Bisco was silent, but his determination. Some time later, people everywhere received free vaccinations, and the rust disease was eradicated. Pawu officially became the new committee chairperson, standing up strongly to protect the fungi sowers. As for Bisco and Milo, they continued to disguise themselves, secretly passing through checkpoints, as both were wanted. The guard uncle who once knew them now turned a blind eye, letting them pass, because in his heart, he was certain these two were heroes. From then on, the two began an adventure together. Bisco spent time researching and repairing his immortal body, while Milo would be the trusted companion by his side. The two of them were an unbeatable pair.